Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Fisher King, a Jack McBride mystery, by Melissa Lenhardt, narrated by P.J. Ochlan. In olden times, the Fisher King was charged with keeping the Grail. When the Fisher King was blighted by a wound that wouldn't heal, castles fell down and the land around was made infertile. There, he lived in a wasteland until the knight Percival came to the castle in search of the Holy Grail. Percival healed the king, and the land burst into blossom, and a time of plenty began. Part 1. Secrets and Lies. Chapter 1. Fred Muldoon needed new shoes. Leaves and twigs worked their way through the hole in the sole of his right shoe as he walked the woods behind Doyle Industries. He stopped at the chain-link fence and stared at the gravel lot, dreading the journey across its uneven surface to his home for the night. He hadn't drunk enough to ignore the pain those damn rocks would put him through, lodging as they would beneath his big toe. Goddamn gout. He patted his coat pocket for his bottle of Old Crow. He could sit here against the fence, drink his whiskey. The night wasn't too cold, and this was as good a spot as any. He sat down against the sagging fence, unscrewed the cap, and lifted it to his lips. A low roll of thunder interrupted him. He took a quick gulp and replaced the bottle. He hated being wet. It used to be an occupational hazard for the town drunk, until Fred stole a pair of wire cutters and used them to cut a hole in a remote corner of Doyle Industries' fence. Between sleeping in the cabs of Doyle's trucks and earning whiskey money from telling Jack McBride innocent lies and useless information about the seedier side of Stillwater, Fred Muldoon hadn't had it this good since 1969. Tonight, Fred targeted his favorite Mack truck, which seemed to be doing longer and longer trips these past few weeks, if its regular absence from the truck yard was any indication. He climbed into the cab and settled down for the night, the smell of wintergreen snuff reminding him of his father. He considered his fifth of Old Crow. It might not be enough tonight. He took off his shoe and tried to flex his red, swollen toe. Goddamn gout. He lay down on the seat, propped his head on the armrest of the passenger door, and inspected his shoe. He'd had these shoes since the Reagan administration, and while the years told on the scuffed, faded leather, the uppers had 20 more on the measy. These shoes were the last good thing Fred bought before his slide down the bottle, and he was attached to them. He didn't cling to them as a tether to a better, more successful past, but Fred figured these shoes would be there when he found the bottom of the bottle or the grave, and he wanted something familiar to keep him company when he got there. Fred placed his shoe on his chest, drank his whiskey, and tried to imagine a way he could get to Yorkville to have them resold. He could probably hit the Methodist preacher up for a ride, and maybe even the cost of the soles. He'd have to stay sober to do it. Not an appealing thought at the moment. He'd worry about it later. The Old Crow wasn't going to drink itself. Fred was well on his way to being drunk when he heard the low voices. Though the truck was high enough he couldn't be seen from the ground, Fred scrunched down into the seat anyway. He'd long since hocked his watch, and the security lights in the truck yard cut off any chance Fred had of telling time by the moon. Not a skill he was good at anyway. He figured it was past midnight. In his 70 years, he'd discovered most bad shit happened after midnight. Though muffled from the closed door and window, the voices were clear enough Fred could hear every word. He grinned and cuddled his bottle closer. He'd have enough money to buy its replacement, or two, very soon.
I'm telling you, I don't trust him. And I'm telling you, I don't give a shit.
Fred's ears perked up at the sound of a woman's voice. He didn't need to see her to know who she was.
You're only saying that because you're fucking him.
Fred shifted in the seat, not particularly wanting to hear more. His shoe dropped to the floorboard with a thud.
Did you hear something?
The woman said. Fred froze and pressed himself further down into the seat. If the woman stepped on the running board and peeked into the cab, he wouldn't live long enough to finish his old crow.
Don't change the subject.
Fred's body sagged with relief. He sucked down the rest of his bottle, in case it was his last.
Why would I change the subject? You're the one who sounds like an ass, not me.
You're unbelievable.
Jealousy doesn't become you.
The man snorted.
I'll explain it again,
the woman said as though talking to a child.
Having the chief's brother in our organization works to our advantage. If McBride takes us down, which won't happen, then he'll take his brother down with us. Pollard said McBride and his mother have bailed Eddie out of scrapes for 20 years.
They won't bail him out forever. Everyone has a breaking point.
You speaking from experience? Maybe you should take some time off.
So McBride can waltz into my place? I don't think so.
The woman sighed.
God, why are men so fucking needy?
I'm not needy. I just don't trust Eddie McBride.
Well, I do.
Why?
I asked him to do something, and he did it.
What?
It doesn't concern you. Don't forget who's in charge. Are you done pouting?
After a pause, she said,
Good. I need you to set up a meeting with the Pedrosas.
Why?
Because kids are overdosing on their dirty heroin, and I'm going to put a stop to it.
You think they're going to stop selling because you say please?
No. I'm going to offer a truce.
They're going to smell blood if you do.
I hope so. That's when you let Jack McBride pick you up. He's been looking for you for weeks.
What? I'm not going back to jail.
You won't. You'll make a deal. The Pedrosas, in return for an easy sentence. You'll get out, come back, and I'll give you the Cypress County operation.
The whole thing?
Everything. Numbers, girls, drugs. Imagine taking it to your Grand Wizard. Y'all can fund your cause for years.
Chris won't like giving up the numbers.
She laughed.
He'll do what he's told.
What about Eddie?
Fred heard a rustling, and the timbre of the woman's voice dropped. He almost didn't hear her next comment.
He's our protection from McBride.
I've seen the way you look at him.
The clink of a belt being released. Then the man said,
Fucking's your answer to everything, isn't it?
You've never complained before.
The man moaned, and besides the sound of feet scraping for purchase on the gravel, Fred heard nothing for a full minute. He lifted his head from his prone position and saw the top of a man's head pressed against the door of the truck, his hand grasping the side view mirror as though hanging on for dear life. Fred lay his head back down and grinned. Someone was getting their pole shined. He might as well join in, if his old pecker would cooperate. Never a sure thing these days. He tucked his empty bottle between him and the seat back and went to work. Fred was at last getting somewhere in his efforts when he heard the man let out a long, low groan, followed by the distinctive sound of spitting.
Eddie will bring our next shipment in on Friday.
That's my run.
You're too important to be an errand boy. You have to get in touch with the Pedrosas and set up a meeting.
I don't know. A lot can go wrong in this plan.
If it goes right, we can get rid of 2 birds with 1 stone.
The Pedrosas and who?
Jack McBride.
Chapter 2. The house needed little coaxing to go up in flames. 100 years' worth of weather and Texas heat had baked the clapboard house to a brittle shell. It stood more from habit and memory than the skill of the one-armed doughboy who built the house on his return to Stillwater from the Great War. 50 years of heartbreak, shell shock, the Great Depression, another war, and old age, and the soldier had died alone, willing the house and land to a woman no one had ever heard of or bothered to try to find. The house and land lay fallow and forgotten, blocked from sight by bushes and brush, until only Stillwater lifers knew a neat little craftsman was once out old Stillwater Highway, just past the city limits, near the river. Volunteer firemen soaked the surrounding field with water, more concerned with wildfire prevention and saving the pastures next door than an old ramshackle house long rumored to be a haven for hobos, hippies, Satanists, wetbacks, or meth heads, depending on the decade. Stillwater Chief of Police Jack McBride, 8 weeks on the job, knew none of the history as he stood back, watching the heat pulse like a heartbeat on the fringe of the fire's aura. The mud-colored smoke hovered, as if reluctant to leave, before giving up and fading in the gray November dusk.
Jack?
Jack turned from the smoldering house to see Sheriff Ann Newberry approaching. As if on cue, the house's stone chimney collapsed into the scorched front yard. "Ann, what brings you to Stillwater during rush hour?" He glanced at the steady stream of rubberneckers being directed past the scene by his 2 new deputies. "I hope you stopped by to take the case off my hands. It's outside city limits, after all."
Doesn't look like there'll be much to investigate.
"Nope."
Think it was deliberate? A belated Halloween prank?
Jack took a deep breath. He coughed. "Smell that?" Anne lifted her nose. She was experienced enough to know the smell of burning flesh buried beneath wood and brush.
Christ. Let's hope it's dead animals we're smelling.
Anne turned her head away and coughed.
Why I'm really here is to tell you we've finished with Pollard's journals. I've brought you copies so you don't have to drive to Yorkville every night.
6 weeks earlier, on suspicion of long-running corruption, Jack and Dan had searched former Stillwater Chief of Police Buck Pollard's house. Their disappointment at not finding trunks of cash and a ledger detailing who paid what and when dissipated when they found county police files, long thought lost, boxes of journals written in Pollard's hand going back 40 years, and child porn on his computer. The next day, word had come from the Coast Guard. Pollard's boat had been found in the Gulf of Mexico, capsized in a September storm. Pollard's body had never been found. "You didn't need to do that," Jack said.
You like spending every night in the Yorkville crime lab reading a dead man's journals?
"I mean, I could have sent Starling down to get them."
"Well, I wanted some fish at Mabel's," Anne said.
"I'm partial to her fried chicken."
"You can't go wrong with either."
A lull followed, and Anne said,
"So tomorrow we tell the others."
Because they weren't sure how far and wide across York County Buck Pollard's corruption reached, only a handful of people knew about the search and seizure. Surprisingly, not a word had leaked. A silence that started out as a test of Jack's senior deputy, Sergeant Minor Jesson's loyalty, ended up being the confirmation that not everyone in York County was beholden to Pollard, though sometimes it felt like it. Tomorrow they would tell the other York County police chiefs about what they'd found, and hope they didn't resent being kept in the dark for almost 2 months. A tall, thin policeman with lank hair sticking out from under his Stetson walked over to Jack and Dan. "Sheriff? Chief?" Even though Jack saw him every day, Minor stuck out his hand. Jack wasn't sure if it was a sign of respect for his position as chief of police, or merely a habit of Minor's, the bone-deep installation of country manners into this thoroughly country man. Minor looked at the house, which had burned itself out in record time. Suppose it's a blessing in disguise. The tweakers will have to find another hangout. Drove by Willow Street on my way over. There's a '84 GMC parked back there that's registered to Paco Morales. Name doesn't ring a bell, Jack said. He stays out of trouble. Been around for 30 years or more. Was legalized back in '86. Was a regular at the Chevron, but's been working out at the country club for years now. The same country club Joe Doyle owns, Jack said. The same.
Willow Street?
Anne asked. Some will park back there and walk across the pasture so as not to park on the road. Draw attention, Miner said. This Morales ever been picked up for drugs? Jack said. Not to my knowledge. I'll run him to make sure, Miner replied. Anne shrugged.
I've never heard of him.
The firemen roamed over the wreckage, checking for and dousing hot spots. Jack looked down at his square-toed dress shoes, his recent polishing shot to hell, and not for the first time realized he wasn't dressed for real police work, or at least the kind he'd been doing in Stillwater, Texas for the last 2 months. As if reading Jack's mind, Anne said,
There's a uniform shop on the square in Yorkville if you're in the market. It's going to be hell getting the smoke out of that wool suit and silk tie. If you want, I can walk around the house so you don't get your shoes dirty.
Ha ha. I'll go, Miner said. When he was out of earshot, Anne asked Jack,
Debate starts soon. You gonna go?
I suppose I should as chief, but I can't vote, he said. Haven't lived here long enough.
Do I need to ask who you'd vote for?
The general consensus seemed to be Joe Doyle was about to be elected to the open city council seat. How it was even a contest, Jack didn't understand. Joe's opponent, Ellie Martin, was a pillar of the community. Joe Doyle was outwardly a successful businessman. Behind the scenes, he was the biggest drug lord in York County. It had only been a theory of Jack's, until a week ago when he came across an entry in one of Pollard's journals that seemed to confirm it, justifying Jack spending the last 6 weeks holed up in the Yorkville crime lab, poring over the journals and tossing information to the DEA and FBI, who had been investigating Pollard for 6 months. Well, I sure as hell wouldn't vote for Joe Doyle. It was unconscionable to Jack for a crook like Doyle to hold a position of power, even in an insignificant small East Texas town like Stillwater.
Ellie doesn't stand much of a chance, I hear,
Anne said. I hear the same. Anne paused and said,
Anything ever happen there? With Ellie?
Jack jingled the keys and change in his pocket. Anything ever happen there? An easy question with a complicated answer. The firemen at the back of the smoldering ruin raised their arms and waved them over as Jack's phone rang. His wife's picture flashed on the screen. He almost ignored it, but figured it was better to get it over with and answered, as water sloshed over his shoes and seeped inside. Shit.
Nice,
Julie said. I'm not cussing at you. What is it, Julie? I'm at a scene.
I thought we were going to the debate together.
I'm working.
Really, Jack?
Yes, really. Would you like to talk to the fireman standing beside me putting out a fire?
I thought the whole point of hiring new people was so you didn't work as much.
Jack sighed. I'm still the chief, Julie. I have to go. We'll talk later.
Jack, don't hang...
Jack clicked off and put the phone in his pocket.
Problems at home?
Anne asked. Jack shook his head. Second verse, same as the first. Anne and Jack walked behind the wreckage and stopped next to Miner and the fire chief.
Shit,
Anne said. The fireman looked at Jack. You seem to attract him, don't you? The fireman walked off, leaving Jack, Anne, and Miner staring down at the charred, smoking remains of 2 bodies. Chapter 3. Jack left once the halogen lights were brought to the scene, so Simon Jones, the lead crime tech, could sweep for trace evidence as late into the night as need be. The scene would be active for hours yet, though the officers would spend most of the time standing around, waiting for other people to do their jobs. Jack thought to use the scene as a way to get out of attending the debate, but with 3 Stillwater cops and half a dozen county deputies standing around waiting for something to do, he couldn't justify it. He'd make a quick appearance at the debate and still be back in plenty of time to see the bodies tagged and bagged. Jack turned off Old Yorkville Highway and onto Boondoggle Road. In a nod to its founding by a lumber baron, Stillwater's streets were all unimaginatively named after trees. Except Boondoggle Road. Only old-timers who remembered the fight against building the road during the post-war boom of the 50s said the name with any derision these days. Jack guessed the same residents who were against moving the main road a mile west of downtown back then would be voting on Tuesday for Doyle, the man who made his fortune from the move, and against Ellie, who wanted to pull businesses back downtown. Apparently, Doyle's supporters' nostalgia for the good old days rested more on the status quo than in revitalizing downtown, if it meant pulling in new residents and tourists. Outsiders. When he couldn't put it off any longer, Jack pulled into Stillwater High School's parking lot and went inside. He opened the front doors to the school and wrinkled his nose against the faint, tangy aroma of teenage body odor hovering in the air. Chris Ryan, Joe Doyle's son-in-law, watched the debate through the rectangular window in the auditorium door. Chris was stocky, with a big head and a bull neck, an athlete gone to seed. "Hi, Chris," Jack said. Chris jumped away from the door as though he'd been electrocuted. Confusion and fear flashed across his face before his expression fell into an easy grin. "Hey, Chief, you scared me." Obviously. Chris was dressed in khakis and a Nike half-zip pullover and smelled of grass and sweat. "Glad I ran into you," Jack said. "You know Paco Morales?" "Sure, he's one of my groundskeepers. Head one, in fact." Chris wrinkled his nose and sniffed. "Why do you smell like smoke?" "Came from the fire out on 107. We found Morales' truck parked back on Willow Street behind DI. You send Morales to corporate for anything?" Chris turned his hat forward and shook his head. "No. Seen Morales lately. Today, at work. Ever had any problem with him?" The front door of the school opened and Minor Jessen entered. "No, none. Very reliable. Why? Do you think he's involved in the fire?" Jack shrugged. "His truck is abandoned where floppers tend to park." Jack jerked his head toward the debate raging inside. "Going in?" "I guess I have to. Michelle's already ballistic I'm late. You?" Minor walked up. "Hi, Chris. How's your game?" "I'm winning more than I'm losing." "Can't complain about that, huh?" Chris shrugged and entered. When the door closed, Jack turned to Minor. "Let's go in the audio booth." Jack knocked on a windowless door next to the auditorium door and opened it. A teenager swiveled in his chair as the two men entered. The kid's eyes widened and he pulled his headphones off. "Sir?" Jack pulled a couple of ones from his wallet. "Take a 5-minute break. Get something from the vending machine." Eyes bulging like golf balls, the kid took the money and bolted. "What did you find?" Jack said. "Esperanza Perez is Paco Morales' daughter." Esperanza Perez had been an important part of solving Jack's first case in Stillwater, the murders of Gilberto and Rosa Ramos. She'd also been the alibi of their initial suspect, Diego Vasquez, who turned out to be the frontman for the Pedrosa drug cartel, as well as the man who escaped Jack's custody his first day on the job. Every police department in York County had been searching for Diego for the last 8 weeks, and no one had been able to find him. "What?" "Yep. Said he hasn't come home. Usually gets home by 6 when it turns dark early. Sometimes he goes out again, but he never came home tonight." "She seemed worried." She tried to hide it, but yeah. How soon will Jones get to the bodies? He's sending them to Tyler, Jack said. It's beyond his scope. Said he'd try to rush the bullets and the trace evidence, but considering his backlog, he didn't promise anything. Apparently, the sheriff's department found a meth lab in some Dallas Oil Company executive's lake house. They cooked in it, but didn't do a good job of cleaning up. Miner watched the debate through the opaque glass. Set up in a house that's rarely used, leave before they realize. No one's the wiser. Surprised it took them so long to think of it. Maybe they're getting sloppy. Jack followed Miner's gaze, but pointedly avoided looking in Ellie's direction. Joe Doyle watched Ellie with a condescending smirk on his tanned face. With a full head of silver hair styled in an elaborate pompadour and his dark suit and power tie, Doyle looked like a televangelist and was about as trustworthy. Jack could look at Doyle's oily countenance for only so long. He stared down at the soundboard. Want to hear what they're saying? Miner pulled the headphone plug from the jack before Jack could reply. Ellie's whiskey-soaked voice filled the room. Jack focused on counting the number of bald spots in the audience until Joe Doyle started talking. If you're such a pussy you can't even look at her, just leave, you idiot. Jack jingled the keys in his pockets. He should leave. If he waited until the debate ended, he would get caught up with talking to residents, and coming face-to-face with Ellie was almost guaranteed. Considering the size of Stillwater, they had done an amazing job of avoiding each other since September, the day his wife came home. He was strong as long as he wasn't anywhere near Ellie, but he wasn't a fucking robot. He would leave. His mistake was glancing at Ellie as she pushed a strand of hair behind her right ear. He was swamped with the memory of the first time he saw the mannerism 2 months earlier, when he sat across the desk from her and talked about Stillwater history and signed mortgage papers. The ache in the center of his chest, the one he had done a pretty good job of ignoring for the past 6 weeks, intensified. Ellie's eyes left Joe Doyle and moved to the back of the auditorium before fixing on the smoky glass separating them.
What was I thinking?
Ellie stood on stage in her high school auditorium for the first time in 25 years and listened to Joe Doyle slyly dredge up every scandal of her life. It was, unfortunately, a long and varied list. Her mother's suicide, her father's gambling, drinking, carousing, and his legendary hatred for his only child. Witnessing the suicide of her best friend on a Lake York dock in 1985. The point-shaving allegations from the 1988 Girls State Basketball Championship. Fertility problems. A lying, cheating husband who swindled Stillwater residents and was serving time in Huntsville. Divorce. Ellie doodled, "Fuck you, Joe Doyle," on her legal pad. She clicked her pen, put it down, and tried to hide her smile. She always wondered what politicians wrote during debates. Now she knew. Ellie's eyes roamed over the crowd. She knew everyone there. Figured 30% would vote for her out of pure spite for Doyle. If dredging up tired old scandals was the best Joe Doyle could do to discredit her, maybe this election wasn't... Oh, hell no. Did he call me a liberal? Ellie removed her glasses and pushed her hair behind her ear. If that wasn't the nail in the coffin of her ill-advised campaign, she didn't know what was. She should probably listen to what Doyle was saying, but what was the use? She wasn't going to win. She knew it. Everyone in this auditorium knew it. They all came tonight to witness her inevitable humiliation at Doyle's hands. There was too much in her history to overcome the modicum of respect she had been able to build over the last 10 years. She knew plenty of people.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?